She stood there, her eyes fixed on the boiling pots before her, staring at the relentless bubbles rising to the surface. The heat in the room seemed to echo the fire inside her, a fire that had once been filled with passion and drive, but now it was sputtering, threatening to burn out. She could feel the sweat on her brow, the pit in her stomach growing heavier with each passing second. Her life, once full of hope and ambition, had become a constant struggle, a series of battles with no victory in sight. Every day it was the same story. She fought to stay afloat, only to be dragged down again. She worked tirelessly, pushing through the pain and the exhaustion, trying to fix one problem after another. But no matter how hard she tried, it was never enough. The bills were piling up higher than she could reach. The deadlines loomed like mountains that never stopped growing. And the more she climbed, the more obstacles appeared in her path, each one bigger than the last. And then, without a word, her father stepped in, calm and steady as ever. He watched her, his expression soft but knowing, as though he understood exactly what she was feeling, even before she spoke. His presence was a steadying force, like the anchor in a storm, but he said nothing. Instead, he moved to the stove and quietly turned the burners higher, adding a potato to one pot, an egg to another, and ground coffee beans to the last. She watched him in silence, her mind racing with questions. What is he doing? What does this have to do with anything? Her impatience grew as the minutes stretched on. The boiling pots hissed and bubbled, and still he said nothing. She glanced at him, confusion and frustration written all over her face. Why was he doing this? Why was he making her watch this pointless demonstration when her life was falling apart? 20 minutes passed. It felt like an eternity. Her thoughts spiraled, each one darker than the last. The pressure was unbearable, the fear of failure clawing at her insides. She was on the verge of giving up, of walking away from everything she had worked so hard for. But just as she was about to turn and leave, her father finally spoke. With a calm that seemed almost too perfect for the chaos of her emotions, he turned to her and asked, "What do you see?" She blinked, still trying to make sense of what was happening. "Potatoes, eggs, and coffee," she answered quickly, her voice flat, dismissive. She wasn't in the mood for games. But he wasn't finished. With the same calm demeanor, he instructed her, "Look closer. Touch the potatoes." Reluctantly, she did, and was taken aback by the softness that greeted her touch. "It's soft," she murmured, her voice tinged with confusion. He nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Then he asked her to take the egg, break it open, and observe what had happened. Hesitant but obedient, she cracked the shell. The inside, once delicate and vulnerable, had turned hard and solid. It was no longer the fragile thing it had once been. Finally, her father gestured to the coffee beans. "Now, taste the coffee," he said. She did, her senses immediately awakened by the rich aroma and the warmth filling the air. A smile, reluctant at first, crept across her face as she savored the transformation before her. "Father," she whispered, still trying to understand, "what does this mean?" He took a deep breath, and with quiet wisdom, he explained. The potato, the egg, and the coffee beans. Each one faced the same adversity, the boiling water. But each one reacted differently. He pointed to the potato. The potato went in hard, unyielding, but the boiling water softened it. It became weak, unable to withstand the heat. Then there's the egg. It was fragile, with a thin outer shell, but the heat made it hard. The inside became solid, defensive. But the coffee beans, they didn't just survive the boiling water. They changed the water. They transformed it into something entirely new, something better. He looked at her, his eyes filled with meaning. "Which one are you?" he asked. "When adversity knocks on your door, how do you respond? Are you the potato, the egg, or the coffee bean?" In that moment, something inside her clicked. For the first time, she understood. It wasn't the boiling water, the struggles, the pain, the hardships that defined her. It was how she responded to them. She had always tried to be like the potato, tough and unyielding, but life's challenges had worn her down. She had hardened like the egg, protecting herself from the world, but losing her ability to truly live. But now, for the first time, she realized she had a choice. She could be like the coffee beans, able to take the adversity and transform it into something better. It wasn't about how many times life knocked her down. It was about how she chose to rise. And from that moment on, she vowed to never let life's boiling water break her again. Instead, she would use it to fuel her transformation. Her name was Lily. For years, she had fought tirelessly, working day in and day out, putting everything she had into her career, her dreams, and her relationships. But despite all her hard work, life had a way of knocking her down. It wasn't just one setback. No, it was a continuous string of obstacles, one after another. Every time she thought she was starting to get ahead, the world would push her 2 steps back. And today, as she sat at the kitchen table with her head in her hands, it felt like there was no escape. The bills, the deadlines, the constant demands of others, it was all too much. She had sacrificed so much, given up pieces of herself, and yet it all seemed pointless. Her dreams, the ones she had fought so hard for, were slipping away, and she didn't know how much longer she could keep going. The weight of it all pressed down on her chest, suffocating her, leaving her with a deep, aching emptiness. She had been through heartbreak, rejection, and disappointment. But today felt different. Today, she was on the edge, feeling as though there was no way out. It wasn't just the pressure of life that wore her down. It was the exhaustion of never knowing if things would ever change. She had fought so hard to build something meaningful, to carve out a life that was worth living. But now, it all seemed to be falling apart. The light at the end of the tunnel was nothing more than a faint glimmer, and Lily couldn't help but wonder if it was even worth reaching for. But in the midst of her despair, her father, a simple man, a chef by trade, wise beyond measure, was quietly preparing the pots. He watched her, his gaze steady but filled with understanding. He had seen her struggles, her pain, and her resilience. And though he never spoke much, he knew something that Lily didn't. He knew that sometimes, when life felt like it was at its worst, it was actually preparing you for your greatest breakthrough. Lily had no idea that the lesson her father was about to teach her would be the one that would change the course of her life forever. A lesson not about giving up or finding an easy escape, but about the power of transformation in the face of adversity. Little did she know, today would be the day that she learned what true strength really meant. Lily sighed deeply, her shoulders heavy with the weight of the world. The sound of the boiling water was almost deafening, but was nothing compared to the noise in her mind, the constant buzz of doubt, fear, and frustration. Her eyes were fixed on the pots in front of her, yet her thoughts were miles away, consumed by everything she had been carrying for so long. She felt as though she was sinking, her energy drained by the constant battle. She had given everything she had, her time, her heart, her soul, and yet nothing seemed to work out. The dreams she once held so tightly felt distant, like they were slipping through her fingers with every passing day. The more she fought, the further they drifted. With each new setback, a voice inside her whispered, "Why bother? What's the point of all this struggle?" Her mind raced with thoughts of failure. I'm just stuck in this endless cycle. Every time I think I've made progress, something else falls apart. She felt like she was running on fumes, and the more she tried to push forward, the harder it became to move. There was no break, no relief. Just one challenge after another, piling up higher than she could climb. Her body ached, her spirit felt broken, and the constant pressure of trying to keep it all together was wearing her thin. She had given her best, but her best seemed never to be enough. The feeling of defeat crept in like a cold shadow, threatening to consume her. Maybe I'm just not cut out for this, she thought, the words slipping out in a whisper, even though she knew she couldn't say them aloud. She had never allowed herself to believe that before, but today, in the face of overwhelming struggle, the thought felt too real to ignore. For a fleeting moment, she considered walking away from it all. What if she just gave up? What if the fight wasn't worth it anymore? What if everything she had worked for, everything she had hoped for, was nothing more than a pipe dream? It wasn't that she was afraid to keep going. It was that she couldn't see how any of it could ever change. As she sat there, staring at the boiling water, the heat of the moment felt suffocating. It wasn't just the pressure of life's expectations. It was the pressure of her own self-doubt. She wondered if anyone else had ever felt this way, if anyone else had ever reached this point where they were so tired of fighting that they simply didn't know how to keep moving forward. But there, in the midst of her pain, something shifted. A quiet voice in the back of her mind whispered, "This isn't the end." Not yet, but it was so small, so faint, that Lily couldn't even tell if it was a real thought or just wishful thinking. She shook her head, trying to push it away, but that small whisper was all she had left to hold on to. And despite her exhaustion, despite the doubts that clouded her mind, something in her refused to let go. Not completely, but just as Lily was about to let go of everything, when the weight of her exhaustion seemed too heavy to bear, her father quietly spoke. His voice was calm, steady, but there was a depth to it that made her pause. He didn't offer her advice or words of sympathy. He simply invited her to watch. Lily raised her eyes from the table, confused and tired. Her father didn't say anything more. He didn't need to. Instead, he moved toward the stove with slow, deliberate steps. With the same quiet patience he had always carried, he placed 3 items, just 3 simple things, into 3 boiling pots of water, a potato, an egg, and a handful of coffee beans. He didn't explain, didn't rush. He just let them sit there, simmering in silence. The room seemed to hold its breath along with Lily. The water bubbled, the steam rising, but Lily couldn't make sense of it. She was too lost in her own frustration, too tangled in the web of her own thoughts. What was the point of this? What was the lesson here? It seemed so trivial, so disconnected from the storm she was battling inside. She crossed her arms, tapping her fingers impatiently on the table. The boiling pots felt like a cruel reminder of her own situation, endless, oppressive, never-ending. What did any of this have to do with the life she was struggling to put back together? But as she sat there, silently watching her father work, a subtle shift began to happen. The pots, the potatoes, the eggs, none of it seemed to matter to her at first. But then, as the minutes ticked by, something within her started to quiet down. It wasn't much, just a sliver of peace, but it was enough to open her mind to what her father was doing. She didn't know it yet, but he was about to reveal the greatest lesson of all, the lesson that would shake the foundation of everything she thought she knew. Lily glanced at him again, still unsure, still restless. She felt her own internal pressure rising, but her father's calmness stood in stark contrast to her emotional storm. In that quiet, in that silence, her father was preparing to show her something that no words could express, something far more powerful than sympathy or advice ever could. 20 minutes passed, though it felt like a lifetime to Lily. Her mind still buzzed with doubts, and the boiling water in the pots seemed to mock her, each bubble rising like a challenge she couldn't quite conquer. But then, her father finally moved. Slowly, he took each item from the pots and placed them before her, one by one. First, he lifted the potato. Once hard and unyielding, it now felt soft and limp in his hands. He placed it in front of Lily, the potato's once firm surface now almost mushy, broken down by the very adversity it had been thrown into. The potato, her father said quietly, was strong when it entered the water, but the heat softened it, broke it down. Next, her father pulled out the egg. Lily watched as he cracked the shell and gently peeled it back. Inside, the liquid once soft and fragile had become solid, hard, unyielding. The egg, her father continued, was fragile and protected on the outside, but when the boiling water came, it hardened the inside. It didn't break, but it became something completely different, something closed off. And finally, her father reached for the coffee beans. Lily couldn't help but notice how different they looked, small, brown, and yet they seemed to hold a certain energy. He lifted them from the pot and, without hesitation, placed them in a cup. Then he added the hot water. The moment the beans touched the boiling water, something incredible happened. The water, once clear and plain, began to change. The color deepened, The aroma filled the air, and the scent of rich, warm coffee began to rise. The transformation was complete. The water had been changed, altered by the very thing that had once threatened to destroy it. Lily's eyes widened as she took in the scene before her. Her father looked at her, his expression calm, but his eyes filled with meaning. "Do you see, Lily?" he asked softly. These 3 items were all exposed to the same adversity, the boiling water. But each responded in a different way. The potato became weak, the egg became hard. But the coffee beans, they changed the water. They used the same adversity to transform everything around them. Lily blinked, the weight of his words settling in her heart. It was as if a door had opened, and suddenly, everything seemed clearer. Her father wasn't just talking about potatoes, eggs, or coffee beans. He was talking about her, about how she had been reacting to the struggles in her own life. She had been like the potato, unyielding at first, but slowly breaking under the weight of the world. She had been like the egg, protective and closed off, but hardened and distant inside. But what if, just what if, she could be like the coffee beans? What if she could take the boiling water, the adversity, and use it to change her surroundings? What if she could transform her pain, her struggle, into something beautiful? Lily sat in stunned silence, the realization dawning on her. The boiling water wasn't the problem. The problem had been how she had been responding to it all along. It wasn't about avoiding hardship. It was about how she used it to shape herself, to shape her world. It hit her like a lightning bolt, a sudden, sharp realization that cut through the haze of frustration and doubt she had been drowning in for so long. Lily sat there, staring at the 3 items her father had placed before her, their meanings now clear. She had always seen herself in the potato, strong and unyielding when faced with adversity. But life had done something to her, like the boiling water had done to the potato. It had softened her, made her more fragile, worn her down with each new setback. She had tried to be unbreakable, to power through the pain, to endure, but the weight of it all had crushed her spirit. Then there was the egg. She realized, with a rush of clarity, that she had been like that too. Fragile on the outside, yes, but somehow managing to shield herself from the world. She had built walls around her heart, hardened by the fear of being vulnerable. But those walls, those defenses, had left her disconnected, emotionally isolated. The more she protected herself, the less she allowed herself to grow. But now, the coffee beans, they were different. They had transformed the water. They hadn't let the boiling adversity break them. Instead, they used it to create something new, something better, something richer. They had been changed, yes, but in the most beautiful way possible. They had not just survived the hardship, they had used it to their advantage. The realization washed over her in a wave of relief. What if she could be like the coffee beans? What if she could take everything life threw at her, not just survive it, but use it to create something better? What if every struggle she faced wasn't something to avoid, but an opportunity to grow, to evolve into something stronger, something more capable? For the first time in a long while, Lily felt a shift inside her. She was no longer trapped by her circumstances, no longer held back by the fear of failure. She could be like the coffee beans. She didn't need to be hard like the egg or soft like the potato. She could take the adversity and turn it into fuel for her transformation. Her past struggles didn't define her. The pain, the hardships, the endless battles, they didn't define her. Her response to them, her ability to rise from the ashes and create something stronger, that was what mattered. That was what would define her. A sense of clarity filled her, a deep, unshakable understanding that no matter how many times life knocked her down, she could choose to rise, to change, and to transform. Her power didn't lie in avoiding the struggles. It lay in how she responded to them. Lily stood up slowly, a new sense of purpose filling her chest. She was ready to face whatever came next, not with fear or hesitation, but with the strength of the coffee bean. Ready to use adversity to change her life, to reshape her future. She wasn't just going to survive anymore. She was going to thrive. Lily's journey is a powerful reminder to us all that life will challenge us, often in ways we never expected. We can't control the obstacles that come our way, the struggles, the setbacks, the hardships. They will always find us. But what we can control, what defines us in the end, is how we respond. In those moments of adversity, we face a choice. Will we be like the potato, strong at first, but softened by life's heat, unable to hold our ground? Will we be like the egg, fragile and defensive on the outside, but hardened and closed off on the inside? Or will we choose to be like the coffee bean, embracing the heat, using the adversity to transform not just ourselves, but everything around us? The choice is always ours. Lily chose to be the coffee bean. She chose to transform her struggles into strength, to let adversity shape her into something better, something stronger. And with that choice, she found a power within herself that she never knew existed, a strength beyond measure. No matter where you are in your journey, you have the same choice. Life will throw its challenges, but you get to decide how to respond. You can let life break you, harden you, or you can rise up, transform, and use everything that's come your way to create something beautiful. The strength, the power, it's already inside you. You just have to choose to unleash it. How do you respond when life gets tough? Are you a potato, an egg, or a coffee bean? Think about it for a moment. How have you faced your own challenges? Have you let them soften you, harden you, or have you used them to transform your life into something stronger and more beautiful? I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments below. Let's start a conversation about how we can all turn our struggles into strength. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe. The next chapter of your story could be just around the corner, and I want to be there with you for the breakthrough you've been waiting for.